I accepted for a very long time the current Aryan Invasion or immigration theory. And when I started looking for the evidence of all this, I found that there was no evidence whatsoever. They don't look at the evidence, or they look at it very partially and continue as if there is no evidence. Archaeologists, for instance, say that there is no evidence of any intrusion before 600, any substantial intrusion before 600 BCE. But they refuse to take it into account. Now, why do they do this? Why do they take linguistic evidence, which means absolutely nothing? Because linguistic evidence can give you no dates. Archaeology and anthropology can give you dates. And they say nothing before 600. They refuse to look at this and they go on about linguistic evidence, which gives no dates. I am not really angry, I'm just shouting so that all the people can hear. Master Eckhart, a German mystic of the 13th century, I think, he was very close to the vision of the visionaries of the Upanishads. He says, he writes somewhere in one of his homilies, there is God beyond the God. Beyond God of the church, there is the real God. He's talking about Brahman. Brahman is beyond all gods.
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Namaste. I, Mithilesh, welcome you all to a new episode of the Study Report. Today we have noted linguist Dr. Nicholas Kazanas on our show. In our Indo-European Languages series, today we will discuss Nicholas Kazanas' book, Vedic and Indo-European Studies. Welcome, Dr. Nicholas.
Thank you.
I'll also welcome other colleagues of Dr. Nicholas, Maria, Christina, Dimitris, Thomas, Lena, and Christos, and others. Thanks for joining this talk. When the evidences from Sanskrit and Rigveda are considered, the current theories about, for instance, the origin and development of language and religion are seen to be faulty and in need of thorough revision. In addition, the cumulative evidences from all these different areas show that the Indo-Aryans are indigenous to India from at least 7th millennium BC. That Vedic is much older than any other Indo-European language and closest to Proto-Indo-European mother tongue. Dr. Nicholas Kazanas is Greek-born. He was educated chiefly in Britain. He read English literature in University College, economics and philosophy at the School of Economics Science, Sanskrit in the School of Oriental and African Studies, all in London. He did his postgraduate studies at SOAS and in Pune and Varanasi. He taught for some years in London. For more than 20 years now, he is Director of Omilos Meleton, a cultural institute in Athens. He has various publications in Greek. Several peer-reviewed academic journals, Western and Indian, have printed his article on Indology. So, Dr. Nicholas, what led you to study Indo-European languages and write a book about it?
Well, it's not quite right that I have studied Indo-European languages. What I have studied is English and then Sanskrit. So Indo-European languages came much later and only in connection to Sanskrit. It was necessary to study comparative linguistics in order to realize the truth about Sanskrit, and by Sanskrit I mean Old Indic or Vedic as well, the old language, and its history. Now, I accepted for a very long time the current Aryan invasion or immigration theory. And when I started looking for the evidence of all this, I found that there was no evidence whatsoever. Consequently, I started studying more thoroughly the Indo-European languages in the ancient history of India. And I discovered that all the evidence pointed to the fact that from at least 3500 BCE, the Indians were in India. They did not come into India in 2000 or thereabouts, as the current theory has it. I wrote several papers on that, and I had a lot of quarrels with various professors, including my own old professor at the School of Oriental Studies, who refused to even look at the evidence. And unfortunately, this is the case with most of the supporters of the Aryan Invasion Theory. They don't look at the evidence, or they look at it very partially and continue as if there is no evidence. Archaeologists, for instance, say that there is no evidence of any intrusion before 600, any substantial intrusion before 600 BCE. But they refuse to take it into account. Now, why do they do this? Why do they take linguistic evidence, which means absolutely nothing? Because linguistic evidence can give you no dates. Archaeology and anthropology can give you dates. And they say nothing before 600. They refuse to look at this, and they go on about linguistic evidence, which gives no dates. I am not really angry, I'm just shouting so that all the people can hear. So this started me off, and I started studying linguistics. And I went into the Indo-European linguistics, which is a mess, absolute chaos. It is not true. It is not pragmatic. They have, for instance, a law which says that phonemes, that is, specific sounds, any sounds, in the given same phonetic background will change in the same way. This is not true. The cerebral vowel R, you know, R or Ru as you pronounce it in India, does not change in the same way in the same phonetic background. This is very evident in Avestan, in the old Persian language. It changes into R, Ir, and so on. And the same happens to many other phonemes, and I give them in this my book. I give plenty of examples, but they don't look at them. They continue to repeat their pet theories And they think that by repetition, their pet theories will be right. Well, of course, this is not the case. So this book is really a collection of different studies, Vedic, specific Vedic studies, and studies of Indo-European aspects that show that we need a different approach for Indo-European studies and Indo-European procedures. The old paradigm is not right. It does not work. Let me give you another example. I collected 400 common cognations in Indo-European languages, Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Slavonic, Russian, that is, and all the other Slavic languages, Baltic languages, and so on. Sanskrit does not have, out of these, only about 50. The next one does not have 145, and then 200 and 250. So Sanskrit retains many more than any other Indo-European language. Consequently, you cannot approach Indo-European linguistics in a socialistic manner, saying that all languages are more or less equal and we must find a middle term, a middle way. Sanskrit is much closer to the old Proto-Indo-European, if ever there was a Proto-Indo-European, than any other language. Consequently, one must give more credit to Sanskrit than any other language. Well, these are some of the aspects that I examine in all these articles published in this book.
Right. So I'll take another question that I have with me. So there are papers and they say that the comparative approach of understanding two different languages, a gold standard. But you refute that. Why so?
Well, I refuse it for the reasons that I've given already, that they give laws that don't apply.
Right.
They apply in certain cases, but not in all cases. That's one thing. The other thing is that, a lot of scholars write lots of things. It doesn't mean that what they write is correct. And one has to take it as absolute truth. For instance, you mentioned Kiparsky and Guardiano and Longobardi, and there are many more. But it doesn't mean that what they say is correct. The Indo-European comparative linguistics has got some insights which are very valuable. But these insights are valuable because there is documentation. Where there is documentation, we have very fine work. Where there is no documentation, we have conjectures that may or may not be true. It's not evidence. So, for these reasons, I refuse to take them for granted and accept their findings. In any way, many of their findings are proven wrong and are being revised. I mean, this is a process that's going on for 220 years now. It began in the early 19th century. And they started with Sanskrit, considering Sanskrit as a primary factor. But then, in the middle of the 19th century, they changed this. They turned over to Greek. They thought Greek is more representative of the old Proto-Indo-European language. But there is no evidence for that whatsoever. This is just an idea of some scholars, and then other scholars followed and repeated the same idea, and if they go on repeating it. But there's no evidence whatsoever. Greek, from those 400 languages, 400 cognate words that I examined, Greek lacks 145. It is behind Germanic. So you can't really, I am Greek, I should be proud of Greece and so on, but it's not a fact. Greek is not representative of the old Proto-Indo-European language. Consequently, I don't accept these findings. If I invented laryngeals, laryngeals are sounds that do not exist in most of the Indo-European languages. But in order to explain certain phenomena that don't tally with their pet theories, they introduce a laryngeal here, a laryngeal there. They used to have 10, now they've dropped down to 3. But when you examine the laryngeals, you see that they are not really necessary. There are other explanations.
Okay, moving ahead. So, Sanskritam, right? Sanskritam means the perfected language. A language that still follows the 8th century CE Panini grammar rule by rule. There is no change so far in more than 1500 years. What Panini wrote, we still follow the same rule. How coherence and preservation in Sanskrit lead us to it being the most closest language to Proto-Indo-European languages, sir?
Well, Sanskritam, true, is the perfected language. It's not perfected. It has many holes. It has developed from Old Indic, from Vedic, the language in which is written the Rigveda, complete Rigveda, all the mandalas, all the hymns of the Rigveda. Now, that's an older language. And there are many changes coming into Sanskrit. But if you examine the vocabulary, you will find that there are some words in Sanskrit that are not derived from dhatus. There are many words in Sanskrit that are not derived from dhatus. There are 800 or thereabout dhatus which give nouns, adjectives, and verbs. Now, there are many words that do not derive from dhatus. So where did they come from? We don't know. Panini wrote his excellent grammar, the Ashtadhyayi, but we don't know exactly when. There are conjectures again that he was 500, or that he was 300, or that he was 800, but there is no actual evidence which can pinpoint the date that it was 800. We don't know. It could be 800, it could be 1,000. We just don't know. So he wrote his grammar in order to fix the language so that it would not deteriorate as it was happening at his time. And so we have a language that is now regulated by the rules of grammar of Panini. It's changing, in fact. There are many new usages in Sanskrit after Panini, but by and large, the grammar that he postulated still holds, and that's the grammar we all learn. But Sanskrit is not perfect. It is a most powerful language, a most beautiful language, but it is not perfect. There are many lapses, there are many things missing, there are many irregularities that cannot be explained. For instance, I'll give you just a simple one. You know, the word for father is Peter, huh? Peter, Pita. Now, it's supposed to come from the dhatu pa, which means to protect. He was the protector of the family. Fine. But how did the R change into E? It doesn't happen elsewhere. So this is one of the things that subtract from the perfection of Sanskrit. There are many other examples like that. There are many irregularities that are not explainable by the rules of grammar of Panini.
Well, moving ahead, moving to Rigveda, you show that Vedic culture are more closer to Proto-Indo-European culture and languages especially. And it is contrary to the Western belief that Vedic culture is originated from Iranian languages. So, what are the proofs that you have found in Rigveda that lead us to think you that Vedic languages and culture were more closer to Proto-Indo-European languages?
Well, I have a a long article in this book. It's called Vedic and Avesta. I don't know if you can read it. And it's got this it's 40 pages long. And I give all the reasons why Vedic is much older than Avestan. To go into this would be very difficult for you lay people because you do not have the linguistic tools with which I shall argue to show and explain what happens. There are certain things that appear in the Rigveda in the late books. As you know, Rigveda has early books, middle books, and late books. Now, there are certain things that appear in the Rigveda in the late books, certain vocabulary. Now, this vocabulary appears more or less in the same form in Avestan. There are certain phrases, collocations they are called. 2 or 3 words together make a phrase, an idiom. Now, these appear in Avesta, but the early collocations of Rigveda do not appear in the Avestan. There is nothing in the Avestan that is not in the Rigveda. And the Rigveda has much more than the Avestan has. The Avestan has only late Rigveda, which means that the Avestan moved away with the late developments, not the early ones, if you follow what I'm saying. There are names, there are phrases, there are what you might call meters of poetry. Then there are developments, very late developments, like later Sanskrit, which do not appear in the Avestan, which shows that the Avestan moved away at some time and didn't stay long enough to have those as well. So for these reasons, and I argue very amply, very in great detail in these 40 pages, why the Iranians moved away from old Sapta Sindhu, the land of the 7 rivers, and its larger area, which included Bactria, and moved into Iran. Now, the Avesta itself, the geography, the older parts of the Avesta begins begin in the south of what is today Persia, of Iran. The newer books of the Avesta show a movement northwest, which means that the Iranians were moving from the south northwestward. They actually say that they passed from the Hindu land. In the Avestan, they mention various places to which they had been, and the very first place was the Hindu land. Now, Hindu stands by itself in the Avesta. There is no other word connected to it in Avesta. But in Sanskrit, Sindhi, Sindhu has many other words connected with it. There is the river Sindhu to begin with. Then there is Sindhi, which means salt. There is Sindhi, which means horse, and so on and so forth. So the Avestan took the word Sindh and turned it into Hind, as they took the word Soma and turned it into Homa. Do you follow? I hope so. It's a regular change. Sanskrit S becomes H in the Avestan. Now, Avestan has also certain grammatical constructs that appear only in late Vedic, not in early Vedic. So these are the reasons why I argued that Avestan comes from Vedic, and that the Iranians moved away from the Indo-Iranian tribe.
Correct. So moving to Indo-European isoglosses. So isoglosses. So there is a diagram by H.S. Hock. So it's a kind of Hock. It says that how the movement of the isoglosses, the language family, has been so far. So we wanted to know your thought on that. H.S. Hock isoglosses diagram.
Isoglosses are many and varied. There are similarities that appear in a group of languages. For instance, the name of sky god, Dios, appears in Greek as Zeus. So, I mean, this may be chance, but it appears also in Hittite as Dishu, and it appears also in Germanic as Tiwaz. So this becomes an isogloss. It's a similar element that appears in 4 of the Indo-European languages. So there are many similar ones. For instance, the negative is na. Na bhajati, doesn't worship. Na khadati, doesn't eat. This is an isogloss with many Indo-European languages. Greek does not have it. It does not have na. There is also one or two other languages also do not have it. But there is also another negative, which is ma. For instance, people should not drink wine. Ma pibet. They should not drink. Now, Sanskrit has both na and both ma. Greek has only na. Some others have only got ma. Sanskrit has got both. So with isoglosses, you get an idea which is the language which is more ancient and from which the others have departed, because it has the elements, it has all the elements that all the other languages have. Do you follow? It has vocabulary, it has grammar, it has collocations, again, phrases, and so on. Now, Vedic is the richest of the lot. And one must not forget one thing, that the Rigveda is only 1,000 hymns. And many of these hymns are repetitive. So its vocabulary is not enormous. Whereas if you look at Old Greek, Homer, Iliad, and Odyssey, this is huge. And it's not all that repetitive. And Old Greek has enormous vocabulary. And yet, as far as isoglosses are concerned, Vedic has more isoglosses than any other language in the Indo-European family. I hope I'm making sense to you.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect, sir. Yes. So many scholars have tried to draw the parallels between Greece and Near East, that is Turkey and Egypt in modern geography. So they try to draw parallels between language and religions, but they failed to notice the similarity between Indian languages and religion and that of Greek. So why so? They don't find
Well-
any similarities.
Well, I can tell you why. Greek has changed from ancient times, just like the old Vedic culture has changed, and later the classical culture has changed, and the language itself. Sanskrit has changed into Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, Punjabi, Gujarati. All these languages are derivatives from Sanskrit. Now, somebody who knows Sanskrit will recognize some words, but will not necessarily know the language of Punjabi, say. So Greek has changed as well, but the pronunciation has changed also very radically. We have lost the sound b. For instance, to take a word, basanizo has become vasanizo. So if you don't know this change, you won't recognize it immediately. It has lost the sound g. Today we form it with two different consonants. In ancient times, grammar was grammar, grammatike. Today we say grammatike, grammatiki, grammatike. Do you follow? There's a difference in pronunciation. In some cases, it's very, very pronounced. So some Indian comes along and won't recognize words that are similar to Sanskrit because the pronunciation is very, very different. Sometimes even the spelling, the writing form has changed as well. So the spelling is changed. Then we become Christians. We no longer worship Surya. We do not worship Dyaus and Prithvi. We worship Christ and Jehovah and the saints. And so we don't worship the old Greek pantheon. That's finished now. So you will not find that either. So the culture has changed very radically and to a very great extent. So people who come and have got these the knowledge of Sanskrit and Vedic and the ancient culture of India, if they sort of cock their ear in order to catch something, they won't. if they look around, they will not find temples to the sun god or to the sky god or to the mother goddess and so on. They will find churches dedicated to Father God and Christ and the saints of the Greek Orthodox Church. That's why they don't notice any similarities.
So the similarities are still there, but they don't go beyond certain point, and they have their own biases. I must say. Well, moving ahead, how do Western writers' notions about origin of religion, who say that religion originated due to the drug-induced shamanic practices of ancient people, turns to its head when you analyze the Rigvedic text?
Well, again, I have a long paper in here. It's the last part one, dealing with these things, with these subjects. The Rigveda begins with the notion of the one. There is that one. It has no gender, it's not feminine, it's not masculine. It's that one. It exists alone before all creation. It breathes even though there is no air. In, out, in, out. But what does it breathe if there is no air? Why does the sage say, Anid avatam? It breathes without air. Svadhaya, by its own power. What does that mean? Well, to my mind, it means that it pushed out the creation and then drew it back. Pushed it out and then drew it back, as we find later in the Upanishads. That's the breathing. Breathes out the creation and then breathes it in. So from this one arises the universe, arise all the worlds, arise all the gods that will create the different worlds, and so on. So Indians realize that everything in creation comes from that one absolute. So why not worship everything in creation? A tree contains the absolute, a stone contains the absolute, Surya, the sun god, contains the absolute, the sky contains the absolute, the sea contains the absolute, everywhere. All the gods which stand for the great powers of nature are in fact manifestations of the will and wisdom of that absolute in the beginning. So polytheism is very natural. But the Indians, apart from the religion, have the philosophy. In the philosophy, they are very strict. And they tell you there is the one, from the one comes everything else. There is the one, and there are many. The many come from the one. When you purify your mind, when you purify your heart through certain processes like yoga and meditation, and through ethical, moral living, you'll get purified, and then you'll realize this absolute oneness everywhere. But most people don't want to do that. They prefer to enjoy life. They don't want to purify themselves. The opposite, they want to enjoy more and more and more. They want to amass more and more and more. Instead of getting rid of what they don't need, they amass more and more and more. You see, you can live very, very comfortably with $1 million or euros or pounds sterling. But people are not satisfied with that. They want 2 million. Then they want 10 million. Now, this is what prevents people from realizing the absolute oneness into which we all live. We all grow. We are born and die in that unity. But we don't realize it because we want more and more and more and more. This is the big difference.
A Western scholar tried to define religion, how religion originated. They say that due to effect of soma or homa, that is a drug. The when someone consumes, they feel the external power, and then they start preaching, and this is how religion was born. But if you read Rigveda, it's against the essence of dharma. What it teaches, it says the self-realization, inner realization. It doesn't teach you that you consume certain substance like alcohol and you behave spiritually. So I want your view on that. Why this kind of distorted view of religion by eminent scholars?
Well, we all are born in different cultural environments. And here in Greece, we have Greek Orthodox religion. In France, they have the Roman Catholic religion. In Sweden and Norway, they have the Protestant religion. In Arabia, they have Mohammedan, Islam. In Africa, they have their own religions. I don't know what their religions are there. We all come from all these different environments, and we are brought up with certain values because of our education, because of our upbringing. Consequently, we view everything around us, we view other cultures through the filters of our own culture, of our own values. Consequently, we don't always get to the basic truth of different cultures. I mean, I admire very much the Hindu approach to polytheism. I can see that there is very sound reason for this, but I don't see any sound reason for monotheism the way the Abrahamic religions have it. My religion, the Jewish religion, the Islamic religion. And then each one claims, I am right. This is the true religion. My prophet is the true prophet. But there are three more who claim the same thing. Why should I believe you? But you see, the Hindu approach is so very different. They accommodate everybody. You believe in Hercules? Yes, we've got somebody like Hercules in our religion. It's Shiva. You believe in the sun god? Yes, we believe in the sun god too. You believe in Christ? Yes, very fine. Yes, we have Krishna also. Krishna and Christ are the same. You see, this is a different approach, an approach that encompasses everything. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, whoever worships me or anybody, whoever doesn't even worship me but worships a stone or a tree or a leaf or a flower, he is welcome to me. Because what matters is the worship, not the object of the worship. Because if you have faith, you have faith. It doesn't matter if your faith is towards Allah or towards Jehovah. So long as you have faith, then you have the strength to move on. But you must expand your mind, you must open your mind and accept that there are other paths as well. There are other religions, other people like to worship other things. I don't know if I'm answering your questions. I hope
it's a perfectly fine. So moving ahead to the politics of this Aryan invasion or Aryan immigration theory. It all started with a British colonial judge, Sir William Jones, in late 18th century. A colonial judge start studying languages, and he finds excellent ideas emanating from Vedas and other religious books. And all of a sudden, he claims that it all is start from somewhere else, not from India. And after 200 years or so, many scholars came and they didn't went and realized to study the ancient text of India, and whatever propagated by William Jones and later Max Muller is still being taught or is still being accepted by wider academia and all the writers and eminent personalities. So why it is being prevented to accept the out of India theory that or the theory of uh, aboriginals of India, like why it is not being accepted so far? What is preventing this?
Well, it's very difficult to change your uh, habits. I mean, if you smoke, it's very difficult to stop it. If you're an alcoholic, it's very difficult to stop that. You become addicted to your ideas. So, scientific theories too. Some scientists get attached to their theories, and although their new proofs appear, if they are good scientists, they abandon their old theories and accept the new one. If they are not, they stick to their theories. But as I said in the beginning, the invasionists, they are very attached to their ideas. Now imagine all these libraries filled with millions of books supporting the Aryan invasion theory. And suddenly there is the proof that this is not right. What would happen? They'd have to scrap it all. And all these names and reputations that are on the peaks of scholarship suddenly will collapse. It's a very great change. I think it's happening slowly, but it will take a few more years or possibly decades. But I'm sure that the new generation of Indians, if they study properly, there's plenty of work and evidence now for them to study and begin to change their mind. The old people will die, myself, Professor Witzel, and so on. Witzel opposes the invasion theory. So be it. When we pass away, the new people will re examine the evidence, and one hopes they will make the right decision. Meanwhile, we proceed as best we can. I personally have stopped dealing with this aspect because I find the philosophy much more interesting. Indian philosophy, Vedanta. I started with Vedanta and I went to study Sanskrit in order to be able to read the Upanishads. And I managed to read the Upanishads, thank God, and I've translated them into Greek. So that was my main interest when I was a much younger man. But I find that Sanskrit itself is a beautiful language, and the poetry of the Rigveda is extremely beautiful. It contains all aspects of all good poetry of the world. The highest peak of poetry was reached in the Rigveda. Thereafter, poets in different cultures repeat the achievements that are in the Rigveda. Have no doubt about it, Mr. Mithilesh.
So we would like to know about your experience with Indian philosophy and what you have found and your experience in general.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So we'd like to know about your experience about Indian philosophy that you have studied and found from the Sanskrit scriptures.
Well, is the most reasonable philosophy of the lot. Plato and Plotinus come very close, but they come close. They are not the same. Master Eckhart, a German mystic of the 13th century, I think, he was very close to the vision of the visionaries of the Upanishads. He says, he writes somewhere in one of his homilies, there is God beyond the God. Beyond God of the church, there is the real God. He's talking about Brahman. Brahman is beyond all gods. There are certain wise people in the West who approach the vision of the Upanishads, who approach the essential vision in the Rigveda. And from these arose so-called Indian philosophy. But I'm not interested in academic philosophy. I'm interested in the Upanishads themselves, in what they teach, and the practical aspect of Vedanta. That your own self is the same as the self of the universe. I am Atma Brahma. I myself am the self of the universe. Aham Brahma Asmi. These are the great sentences in the Upanishads, engraved on the thrones of your Shankaracharyas, the great Mahavrittis. 5 of them. Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma. All this entire universe is the embodiment of Brahman. So, with these ideas, the mind finds great satisfaction. And you want to realize this. You want to realize it in your own experience, not just read about it and discuss it and talk about it and teach others and so on, but actually experience it, realize it in your experience. And if you are lucky enough, help other people to realize it in their experience. Now, I hope there are some Indians listening to us. Are there? Well, what I'm trying to do is also give them a lesson so that they can also go back to the roots of their culture. And by that, raise themselves and the whole nation. Because it's the only way a nation can be raised, by going back to its roots, by going back to its ancient virtues, putting them into practice, and thereby cleansing mind and heart.
Yeah. So tell us something about your future project that you are currently working, Professor.
Well, my future plans. Is that what you're asking? Yes. Well, as I said, I'm not dealing very much anymore with Indo-European matters, because whatever I had to say, I put it in this book. So whoever wants to find more can look into this book. It's highly specialized. Few people can actually read it and understand it, but so be it. All the evidence is there. My interest is philosophy, practical philosophy, and especially the fundamentals of Vedanta, the Upanishads, the Rigveda. So I'm writing, I've done the translation of the Upanishads. I have still to finish. I have done it already, but I'm polishing it now, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I've not published that yet. It's a large one. It's a big Upanishad. And in the summer, I had a week's course on the Bhagavad Gita, the yoga of action in Bhagavad Gita. I did this in Greek, of course, but reading the Sanskrit verses and translating them to the students. I had about 25, 30 students. So this is what interests me now, and this is the area in which I work. My last book was In the Beginning, and it's full of philosophical essays, not linguistic essays.
Yeah, so I think we are towards the end. So yeah, thank you, Professor, for joining us and giving your valuable time and thought on this topic. And I would also like to thank you, all your colleagues who came and joined us. Thank you, Maria, Christina, Thomas, Dimitris, Christos, Lena, Vigla. So thanks for joining, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, indeed.
We thank you very much for allowing all this to happen.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Namaste.
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.